Hi, my name is Florine and I'm a developer.
And I'm Adrian, and I'm a designer, and today we're going to talk about style guides. But before we do that, let's talk about this stylish drink that you've procured for us.
Yeah, it's called Paulaner Spezi, and you might know the brand Paulaner from the German Weizenbier. That's because that's what they're
Fairly well known, yeah?
mostly known for. But they also make the soft drink, and it's kind of a retro drink.
Well, from the look of it, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I expected to say somewhere on this bottle that it's made in West Germany.
Yeah. So, but it's basically it's like Coke mixed with orange lemonade, I think.
Okay, so that's like popular in Germany? I wouldn't even know.
I don't know, but I think you can, in some places, you can just order a Spezi and then they will mix at the bar Coke with Fanta or something like that.
Interesting. Let's try that out.
Yeah.
Even though we're not at a bar in Germany. Cheers.
Cheers. So, style guides.
It's very fizzy. I like it. Yeah, but we should probably get to it.
Yeah.
Style guides. Well, most of us who've studied design, I think, they will be familiar with the term style guide, but maybe that's not really what the type of style guide we are going to talk about today, because they might refer to like a brand or a corporate guide.
Something like, I know some really cool examples from the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yeah, they've been popping up all along Twitter for a
Yeah,
while.
because there's a like really also retro.
Oh yeah, really nice ones.
But I like the one from NASA, but that's more of a brand.
Yeah, that's more like a brand guideline,
Okay.
because it deals mostly with like logo placements. Like if you have a car, where do you place the NASA logo and what colors do you use for that? So it's much on the corporate side of things.
Okay, but I know there. For instance, the London Underground style. Is that more like a style guide and less like a brand guide?
Well, it's a bit of both, but that's actually more like what we're going to talk about when we talk about web style guides, because
Okay.
it's very expansive. I mean, if you've seen it, it's massive. There's a lot of different things defined in it, but it deals also not just with like how do you place logos, but also with like how is the type supposed to look, and what colors do we use for that, and how do we make signs,
And what icons do we use?
Exactly.
And where do we place them in a
Exactly.
station, for instance, and stuff like that.
and that's really interesting. So it's very detailed, and it deals with a very complete set of design elements, which is actually really cool.
And that's also how we are going to look at web style guides, right? That's or maybe some of you would rather call them front-end style guides, and that's a reusable set of elements that you can use to create a consistent whole, like a website or a web application. So these are just elements that you're going to use when you're building new pages.
Yeah.
So,
So out of curiosity, just real quick, do you call them front-end guides or style guides, or do you call them
I just call them style guides.
just style guides that you covered? Okay.
My work and the context within it would be logical that I'm not building something for underground signage.
You might be. You don't know. It could all go digital someday.
Yeah.
And
So,
might be different.
yes.
So, but basically, we should probably address why would you want this? Why is this important?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is that you want to have your website or application to be consistent over time. You want the UI to be consistent. You want the design to be consistent. And I always think there should be some room for exceptions, but that should always, when there is an exception, it should be put back in the style guide again. So
Yeah. Okay. So you don't have. Basically, what you're saying is, if it's not in the style guide, it shouldn't exist.
absolutely,
So-
the style guide is holy.
Yeah, so it is a very accurate documentation of all the stuff that
Yes.
is possible, and you're not supposed to make things that are not going to be in there at some point.
Yes, well, for me, I'm a bit more extreme. I'm going to say is you should do all future development, and with development I don't mean web development, but also development of the style from that style guide, and you shouldn't be changing your website first and then maybe do something later in a style guide. You should
So
start
you shouldn't
with the
treat
style
it
guide.
as like, oh, we're going to do the documentation afterwards. You can't.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely
no.
not.
Everything you build or you're going to create should have its base in the style guide and should be built in the style guide first.
Yeah. For designers, that's slightly different because we have more explorative approach to things. So we will make things that have no place in a style guide because they will not be reused, and they are just basically tests of what are we going to make and how does this work.
Yeah, of course. You can have a lot of sketches, and
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I see very hard for designers is that a style guide is it's basically a list of things.
Yeah, it basically just sums
up
all the items
Yeah,
and elements
exactly.
and stuff that you have.
And I can imagine for a designer, you're designing a page, and maybe some of these items you are not focusing on, so these can be easily taken from the style guide. But let's say you're creating a new element, and you want to design that in context and not in a blank canvas and have just that element.
No, you can't have it floating in space somewhere
in a white space. Yeah,
without the surrounding page. I mean, we could do that. I don't think there would be technically anything wrong with that. I just think it would be very hard to sell that to a client because they wouldn't understand where does this go and how does this relate to other elements. And
yeah, exactly.
So that might be very hard.
Yeah, well, what we then do is we do in our style guide, there are some demo pages.
Yeah, exactly.
That will demonstrate a full page in combination. But again, these demo pages should never be the basis of your development. You should not have something in your demo pages that is not in your style guide.
No, definitely not. I mean, it might contain like actual content from the site, but that's not really relevant. That's not
exactly,
really
because that's something that you wouldn't put in your style guide elements.
No, because you want to reuse all these elements, so you don't have that defined.
So,
okay. And I think that another thing that's really important about style guides, at least for developers, is that you can basically be lazy. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, right?
And I think that's why something like Bootstrap is really popular, because basically Bootstrap is a big style guide.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why it's really popular with developers, because they may not have the budget for a designer, and they still can make something that would look good.
Acceptable. Yeah, that looks good
and work pretty well. So they can just take the different elements and build something new from that. Yeah, and that's basically what a style guide is.
Yeah, and actually we can look at some examples of how companies do this.
Yeah, because there is a really cool site. It's called styleguides.io, and it links to different examples. And we want to just show 2 examples of how MailChimp and Lonely Planet made their style guides.
Yeah, so let's have a look.
So first here you have the MailChimp style guide.
Exactly, yeah.
And you can see they have a page for typography, form elements, navigation, all kinds of things. And
they also include like their grid system, which I really like, which is really cool.
Exactly, yeah. Let's have a look at that. They have the different grid sizes and how you use them. There's some navigation here, like mixed grids, and how you can combine everything. Mm-hmm. And they even have the code to go with it. So as a developer, I can just look at this and copy this and start playing around with it without having to look at the source for this or something like that, this is really powerful to have.
And it will aid consistency, because if you always reuse this code style, then you will actually create sites that are structured much alike.
Exactly.
Which makes for a cleaner HTML, no?
Absolutely, yes. Another really nice thing is that they have typography in here.
Yeah.
So they have all the different headings, all the different body copy, and they just say
relative sizes and
they have some examples, and again the code to go with it. So that's a really powerful way to build from these blocks. You're just going to reuse them, and without having to. Whenever you're even designing a new element, you don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel. You just can take these elements.
So what I really like about the MailChimp example is that it visualizes very clearly what things look like. So we talked about this before, where they have like abstract things like grids, for instance, that are, if you look at a site that is populated with actual content, it might not be very evident how the grid system actually is divided.
This works, and then what to do, how the different steps are and different blocks are.
And so they abstracted that, and they made a layout specifically for that just demonstrates how does it work. How do all these pieces fit together? Yeah. And the same thing with their typography, like how are the different styles related to each other? How do they match up in scaling, for instance? How do they match up in style? And that's really cool that you can see that, and also their column view of different typesets. That's really nice.
It's really powerful for reusability. But what we said they had the code, the HTML code right next to the example.
That's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really nice. But I want to take a look at the Lonely Planet style guide because
goes a bit further.
They will take it to the next step. So let's have a look. So here we have Lonely Planet. They have an extensive color palette. So
it's massive.
It's massive. They have, but they have the gray palette, primary palette, secondary palette, and
they give the variable names too.
Yeah, and they even show what variable names you can use. I don't know what they use, sass or less or something like that. But I guess you can just use the pink variable, and then you get the correct pink color.
Yeah, you get the.
So that's really powerful. But
what I want basically an attribute list, no?
Yeah,
so the colors.
Yeah, so, but they have lots and lots of colors, like UI colors, destination, next color, and even as well typography as well.
Oh yeah, so they follow basically the same
rule. But we said they take the HTML next to the element a lot further, and that's very apparent in here in the UI components. And their cards components are extensive lists of how they show cards, and they have all variants in here. Like you have a card with an image, card with kind, context, text, and context.
It's really extensive. Yeah.
But then we see some kind of weird code next to it. It's not really HTML or CSS.
This is JSON, no?
This is JSON, yeah, and they have like defined this element is defined by these properties. So they have this system called Rizzo, and that's really cool because they can reuse the actual front-end code in their back-end application. So whenever they change the front-end, it will change automatically in the back-end as well. So they don't even have the step where you have to copy the HTML to the back-end application. So that's really, really cool.
That's actually a really elaborate example of a style guide. I don't think I've ever built or worked on a site that has a style guide this extensive or this detailed. For example, the Lonely Planet one it's huge.
It's massive.
It's massive. And how does that work in Upkeep? Like you say, well, you don't make things and then you do it as documentation later. Added to the style guide is not something you want to do. You want to actually work within the style guide.
Yeah, what they do is, as I said, they will have to change. When they change the style guide, that will implicitly change their application or their website as well. So that's one way to go. But that's for a lot of projects. That's going to be very complex to do.
Yeah.
So. But what I said in the beginning of this video is you should never make it the style guide something that you do, or we're going to do that afterwards. We're first going to build the site, and then we're going to do this style guide.
At some point, you're going to forget or ignore it or think.
And it becomes a development or a designer burden. Just okay.
Yeah, it's a chore.
It's a chore.
I'm done with the fun part. Now I have to do documentation.
Because the boss said we had to do it, or we have to do it for the future, and we all know it's very hard to relate to your future self, and then you will be.
It's a future use problem.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you will yell at past you because.
You'll be mad at at 1 a.m.
Yeah, exactly. So everything you do, you should do from the style guides, and you build from the style guides toward the final product instead the other way, trying to recreate it afterward.
Yeah. And so can you tell me something about like how are these style guides all built up? Like what kind of elements do they cover from a front end perspective?
Yeah, well, we saw it was quite apparent in the two examples. What you see is you have components, and components are like the Lonely Planet's cards, but for Mailchimp is like a grid is also a component.
Yeah.
There could be some distinction between components that can be nested, and you may want to call them a container, like a grid.
Because a container contains components.
Exactly, because a grid in itself, you can place it on a page, and it's kind of useless.
Yeah.
But there are other cases where you want to nest components. So that would be to have container components and just regular components. They will not nest anything. So that's one part of the puzzle. And then there's the other part. It's called what we call attributes, and that's your type system, colors, maybe icons, and stuff like that. That's media queries can be in there.
Yeah.
So these are things that you will reuse within components.
Yeah, exactly. They don't do anything on their own.
No, they're just definitions.
They're just they're definitions
They're
of
definitions.
things. Yeah. Okay. And then to that you probably add the code styles. Yeah.
Yeah, that could be part of that as well.
Okay, but that's also like it's a separate thing.
That's a separate document, and it's often the code style can be implicit in the code you've written, but it's probably best practice to put your code style guides in your style guide as well.
Okay.
So whenever another developer goes on with working on that, he or she can just pick up on that and be consistent in your code styles as well.
Yeah, and so there are some requirements when it comes to when you make something inside your style guide. Because we talked about being lazy before. That means we have to actually aim to make things as reusable as possible. No.
Yes, that's a big thing, and that also means that you have to isolate. This is especially a deal with when you're using CSS, and that's you don't want to have any leaking styles.
Yeah, so you have interfering from other things.
In some cases, that's acceptable, especially in containers. That may be acceptable, but
sometimes you even want that.
So. Yeah, sometimes you even want it, but you really want your components to be as standalone as possible. You don't really have, because I put these two next to each other, they will behave differently, because that's going to be really hard in the long run.
It's going to be hard to maintain, I think.
So,
and you don't know if you work with a CMS, for instance, and you have clients that build up the pages on their own. Sometimes they might combine in very unexpected ways, which could lead to very unexpected results.
Unexpected breakage.
And then they will call you and they were like, come on, man.
And then we really, but we didn't think of that. Why do you do that? Yeah. So that's when you isolate, that's less of a problem.
There will be less of a problem because you basically can't foresee every use case.
No, exactly.
It's just not possible.
Exactly.
Okay, that's interesting.
So we talked about attributes but if we have to make a list of icons or make a list of type things or make a list of colors, that's kind of stupid work.
Yeah. So we like being lazy. So.
And I think that's just stupid work. And if you use something like a preprocessor like Sass or less, we use Sass. We have defined the variables for colors, and why can't we just create these attribute lists like the colors or the fonts, type system from these variables and mixing we have created?
Yeah, so you can basically auto-generate a list of attributes.
Yeah, so that's actually the last thing I want to do in this video. I just want to show a little example of tool we're creating where we can actually create these attribute lists from the code.
Yeah, and this tool will be open source, yeah?
When it's ready, we're going to open source. It's going to be a command line tool that you can run on your code.
Looking forward to that. Okay, so let's have a look.
So what I got here is a demo.scss file, and we have defined some fonts to use here, and a bit of font variables for our font stack, and we have defined our type mixins. So type header 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and for the paragraph, so some types stuff. And we've defined different color variables. We even defined a color map.
Cool.
And some sizing variables.
Yeah.
And we automatically generate from these variables, like the colors, we generate this list of variables, and we can see, oh, these are all these colors, and I can use this copy button, and it will copy $C brand to my clipboard, and I can use that directly in my code. That's really cool. Another thing that's really nice is that we will also have a list of measurements for you, and that's probably something that's more useful to a designer, because you can see
it's more useful to a designer. Actually, this was a request from me, because it's often hard for me to visualize how do spaces relate. I mean, I can look at the code, but it will be very abstract. You know?
Yeah. So how does one pixel relate to 3
rem, for instance? Yeah. How do you? I mean, you can calculate that in your head what that would be, but you know, it's
so much easier to see.
To just look at it.
And the last thing it does is it will generate a list of typography styles from the type mix-ins.
Yeah, that's also really helpful if you want to make the styles consistent and related to each other. So that's really nice.
Yeah, and it will automatically update this. So if I'm going to change the brand color to, let's say, black, and I will save and refresh, and you can see the brand color is now black. So that. It actually takes the code, it analyzes the code, and it will generate your attribute list from that. So that's just what I want to show you.
Okay, cool. So basically, in short, when you make a style guide, don't make it extra work, don't make it extra documentation. Automate where you can.
Exactly.
And that's basically what we've been working on, creating this tool, which we'll be happy to share with the world once it comes out.
Yes, and yeah. Happy style guiding.
Happy style guiding. Thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing. We'd like to thank our sponsors, DigiPaint and Asphalt Photo, and we'll see you in the next one.